You know the owner? Really? My stepsister and her girlfriend rent a house that my boyfriend and I purchased, rehabilitated, and remodeled in a college town in central Missouri. They are on the lease with some fellow students at the local college. So, in a 3-bedroom house, there are 5 girls. My boyfriend is over often because he takes care of a lot of the gardening and the task that requires some heavy lifting. He had warned me that the next door neighbor is a bit nosy and seems to be the old biddy type, despite not being elderly. Just for those keeping track, that's 5 girls and 1 guy that routinely comes over. I haven't really even been to the house since we finished it until this last weekend. Someone had suggested that some small garden boxes along the side of the house would be nice so that they can plant some herbs and maybe some vegetables come springtime. And I am all about that since I'm the green thumb of the couple, so I went over and I built some terraced garden boxes along the side of the house, each about 4 foot by 3 foot, so each bed was about 3.5 foot wide by 3/4 of a foot. Why am I doing this right before winter? Well, basically, so we can make sure that the boxes are draining properly without losing too much soil from the box due to runoff. So I'm just finishing up when the old biddy Karen makes her appearance. The conversation starts off rather normal, even though I can tell that she is digging for some gossip to be able to tell the women's group at church. And then she beckons me closer and says, "I know you're just the hired help and you're here just to do a job, but do you know what this house is?" No, what is this house?" I ask. "Well, I don't want to get involved, but I figured I ought to warn a pretty young thing like yourself that this is a brothel," Karen says, her voice lowered conspiratorially. I ask her what proof that she has of this, and she explains that she saw a man here about a week or so ago. We collect rent on the 5th, and he was telling the girls that they had to pay him. She then goes on to explain that when he went to leave, my stepsister and her girlfriend both gave him a long hug. And I ask her if she has anything else, and she says that she sees a mixture of people coming in and out, mostly men coming and staying for a couple of hours or so before leaving, which really ain't that unusual for 5 college students to have friends and classmates come over, like for study groups and for group projects. My mistake is that I ended up rolling my eyes and clearly appearing uninterested in listening to her further because she started to huff. "I see you aren't concerned about these young girls and their welfare. I bet that pimp has you in on it too. Well, I know the owner of this property and I'm gonna call him and report what's going on to them." This is where I knew I had her, because my boyfriend and I own this place outright, and I don't even know her from Eve, and she clearly didn't know my boyfriend from Adam. "Go ahead, Karen, why don't you call him over?" I say to her. Well, they live in St. Louis, and you know what that means," Karen says. No, I really don't know what that means. I push, just trying to figure out if she innocently just means that it would take the owner too long to get here, or that the owner doesn't care, but St. Louis and Kansas City have also become a bit of a dog whistle for black in this part of the state, and that is exactly what I think she means by it. Almost confirmed by her stuttering over her words and repeating, "You've got to know what that means." "You shouldn't have said nothing. You're exactly what's wrong with this state. Now I need you to go take your bigoted butt back inside and leave us alone. And if I hear about you harassing them that live or work here, I'll have the police right here ain't like and in a hurry to snatch you right on up," I said. This did have the desired effect of making her go away. What I failed to foresee in my anger was Karen calling the police and claiming that I threatened her. My stepsister came out shortly after Karen went away and was talking to me about her and some of the rude comments that have been sent to her and her girlfriend's way, from "bless your hearts" and "y'all need Jesus" to "you women are going to heck." It was about this time that the police roll up and start asking me questions about what was going on with Karen, as they had gotten a report that someone matching my description had threatened her. So I relate to the officer more or less what happened above. It's at this time that my stepsister asks the officer if she can show him something on her phone. The officer says yes, and my stepsister proceeds to show him a video with audio of the conversation and this lovely 6 foot plus tall police officer that is also African American also picks up on the unspoken meaning of St. Louis owners, and he is clear that it gets his hackles up, and my sister then proceeds to show him videos of Karen's harassment towards her and her girlfriend. He gives a clip, "Y'all can go back inside, but don't go far, I'll be right back." Us, all being biddies in training, immediately gather round the side window that allows us to overlook her front door. He marched up to her door and gave it 3 thudding clubs against it before waiting for Karen to come out. Unfortunately, he did not have the conversation on the porch with her, but I will say this. Even with all of her doors and windows closed, we could hear the officer's raised voice. He came back about 5 minutes later and told us that he had warned her to leave us alone and to stop harassing us. Before leaving, he gave my stepsister his card and said that if she starts up again, to give him a call and he will get us a no contact order and charge her for harassment. It's been 4 days and Karen won't as much as look in the direction of anyone in the house. Hopefully this is the end of it. I feel like this Karen acted like she had everything in mind and knew what was up, and then whenever it came back in her face, she caved. How would have you handled this one? Want me to unload my own trailer? Okay, I needed a vacation anyway. Posted by Arrow the Observer. So I was a trucker for a while, and that comes with plenty of stories of crazy things in so many places. One of my favorite stories, however, comes from a piece of malicious compliance that came together just perfectly. The setup. I tend to be a bit on the lazy side when I can get away with it, and I searched for quite some time to find a company that would keep me far away from unloading the trailers myself. I found a good one that had a 95% drop and hook rate, which is where you drop off a trailer full of goods and then grab a new one that's either loaded or to take to the next pickup. 4.9% of them are either handled by the receiving dock or by lumpers, which are dock workers hired by the warehouse companies specifically to unload trucks. That 0.1% is a list of places that just want to watch you work or be convinced that you really shouldn't operate their lifts. In my contract, I saw that there was a place where your hourly rate for unloading was stated, not for the hours that you were sitting and waiting to be unloaded, but for when you were the one unloading your own trailer. So I also saw that the contract allowed for alterations to be made to the price of this service to be charged to the customer. As a joke, I put in not 1, but 2 extra zeros. $1,500 an hour for unloading a trailer? That should deter most people. Most people saw that, got a good laugh, and then pulled in someone to unload for me. The event. Most people, like I said, were smart. This run was set to arrive at 3 o'clock to a certain clothing store in the mall. Let's call him IB Nickeled. I'd been to the store a few times before, and it was always the same manager, Mr. Dime, receiving me, and it was always the same runaround. If I wanted to get unloaded, I had to wait for someone to get there, and then I'd have to sit and wait while the poor kid back there got the load off, and then I'd have to wait for traffic to ease up to get out, since it was always almost 10:30 by the time I finally left, leaving me with only a couple of hours left on my clock to get to a truck stop for the day. I got there and, yep, Mr. Dime had come in to accept the load. It was always hard to be smart at 3 o'clock, and I can only imagine that was part of Mr. Dime's usual runaround. This time was a bit different for a few reasons. 1, he smelled like there was a bit of an herbal calming remedy about him to settle his nerves for the night. 2, he said that he was completely understaffed and there was no one around to unload me, so I'd have to do it myself. 3, I couldn't stay to my usual time because he had to leave before 5 o'clock. To be fair to him, I did try and say, sure, but my contract says, I don't give a dang what your contract states. I don't have anyone in until the store opens, and I've got an appointment that's more important than some trucker's contract. Just unload it yourself. I considered it for a moment and went back up to my truck to get my tablet. This was in 2019, before the virus, and the company had just swapped over to tablets for certain things, like signing off on expenses or getting permissions. Mr. Dime was fuming when I came back and handed him the tablet. Yeah, just read through and sign with your finger. He didn't read through. I had 20 pallets at 1,500 pounds each. The only available tool to unload was a manual pallet jack. I started my work clock and began unloading at 3:15. At 5 o'clock, Mr. Dime looks on in satisfaction to see me about 3/4 of the way through as he's out the door. At 5:15, Mr. Dime's replacement, Mr. Quarter, of the day shift, comes running in with his face white as a sheet to see me taking off the fourth to last pallet. Please tell me that I'm reading this wrong, he pled fruitlessly. I wish I could, I lied, knowing that Mr. Dime was about to be up a muddy creek with a spoon. I even tried telling Mr. Dime what he was getting into, but he just skimmed and signed. He slumped. Wait here, I need to call my district manager. Better be quick. I want to be out of this lot by 6:30 to beat the morning rush and get a good breakfast. He ran back, and I continued unloading. When I finally got the last pallet off at 5:50, I turned off my time clock as the district manager came in. We'll call him Mr. Dollar just to keep consistent, followed by Mr. Quarter, who was looking somewhat relieved, and by Mr. Dime, who was somewhere between terrified and furious. "You're Mr. Arrow?" Mr. Dollar asked, holding a printout and looking to it for the name. "That's me," I agreed. "I take it they sent over the contract Mr. Dime signed?" "Yes, and that's just it. Mr. Dime is accusing you of forging his signature on this, since there's no way he'd sign off on a multi-$1,000 contract just to unload a trailer, especially since he claims you insisted on unloading it yourself." I whistled. "Whew, that's a heck of an accusation. Hey, is that the CCTV I see up in the corner over there?" I asked, knowing full well that the entire loading dock was covered by a slew of cameras. The one I pointed out was positioned just right to catch the whole conversation at the door. "Mr. Quarter, get the footage," Mr. Dollar said. "We don't have audio, but we do have visual on them." Mr. Dime lost his fury and now just looked petrified. The fallout. One review later, and I was grinning like a loon back to my truck. I called my manager, booked some home time, and walked away with enough money to last to the end of the month. The next time I went into that IB nickeled, there was a new, much more sensible manager who always had a man on staff to unload the trucks. A quarter tank, also posted by Arrow the Observer. So, a while ago, I posted a story about IB nickeled and their nonsense. So, let's go back a bit further now to another story from my first trucking job, in my first 6 months as a trucker. The company I worked for was infamous because every new guy lasted about 90 days. This story is about that company and what got one of my managers fired, all because of a simple request to be fueled on a short haul load. This load was dog food coming over from Sparks, Nevada and dropping at a distribution hub in Sacramento, California. My last load had been dropped a couple days before and I'd been sitting there waiting because I'd requested some home time. I lived in San Bernardino County, California at the time, so yeah, already in a bad mood from that since it killed my vacation days I'd saved up from that time. Lots of stories from this company, but I'll move on since this story is about me getting payback on that guy. So, I've been sitting for a couple of days. It's late August, I've been hot, and I've been running my rig for AC at night. I finally get my dog food load and notice that it doesn't have a fuel stop. The pickup is in 30, so I shoot a message over the Qualcomm unit to ask for a fuel stop. Due to this being a short haul load under 200 miles, you will not be assigned fuel for this load. Cool. My gauge is on a quarter tank, but I'm sure they know that, right? I shoot them that info just to be sure and get no response while I'm picking up my load and getting ready to leave. Finally, I call my manager. Note that it's been around 10 years since then, so apologies for not having the conversation perfectly memorized. "Oh, hey boss, you know I'm heading into Cali, right?" I asked. "I just need a fuel solution." You're good, dude. Just get this load done and we can get you fuel." He was, annoyingly as ever, ignoring my concerns. That's just it. I'm in Nevada at the moment, and as soon as I get to California, the price will jump." I tried explaining. "It's only $2.50 over here, but my uncle said it was nearly $5 in Sacramento right now." You just get rolling. I'll figure something out if it's really bad." Well, I tried, and I was feeling particularly mad after the fiasco with my home days. So I set off, doing some mental math. I was loaded pretty heavy and going over one of the more annoying passes in the US. If you've done Donner, you know. I get up to the top of the pass just fine, still a bit over 1/8 tank left. 200 gallons worth of tank, so about 20 gallons at an expected 9 miles to the gallon on the downhill with Jake's at full. Let's do this. Sure enough, I roll down the mountain with just enough gas to get me to my drop on Sacramento's harbor, then have down to the yard just enough gas to get to the 49er truck stop, the only spot my company had for fuel at the time in the area. My engine cuts in and out as I pull into the island. My manager is on for another 5 minutes or so, so I give him a call. "Hey, I just got to the truck stop and my rig is running on fumes. Can I get some fuel?" He was rushed and annoyed since he wanted to get home, just like I wanted to at this point. I still didn't expect what I got. "Yeah, just fill up. You're authorized for 220 gallons, so you can get the reefer too if you have a trailer." And with that, he hung up. For those who don't know, August 2012 saw prices through most of California going back up to just over $4 a gallon. The 49er, who had somewhat of a monopoly because they were absolutely massive and the only major brand out there from what I knew at the time, were charging $6.50 or so per gallon. I'd just been given carte blanche for a full tank. I still remember the gallons and the price readout. 203.89 gallons at $1,309.55. Yep, $1,300 on a fill-up that normally costs about $400 on the extreme high end in the rest of the country. I went to bed knowing there would be a storm of epic proportions the next day. I was 21, annoyed, and fully willing to roll with whatever was coming because I was spiteful. Sure enough, I got a call from the night manager before the sun even came up. "Arrow, what the frick is this fuel bill?" Pull the Qualcomm messages in the call log from last night," I replied before hanging up and falling back asleep. When the sun was up, I had a message on my Qualcomm from my manager's manager, along with a new route directly to my home terminal. My manager had been fired, and they wanted to see me in person to figure out just what was going on. I got there, and after a couple of meetings, they gave me a week off and transferred me to relief and recovery. I have some horror stories from that, but those are for another time. For that day, I had just won against the single most annoying boss I'd ever known and had finally gotten myself a bit of time with my parents and brother, which was good enough for me. Hey, you're just doing your job, you need the gas to do that job, he tells you what to get when you get it, you try to help, he doesn't listen, you're doing it malicious compliantly. One by one, posted by the portable door. I was recently reminded of this story from a colleague. I work in contracts, meaning my department audits signed documents to make sure everything is legal and compliant with our policies. We have a very old system that we use. Think like early DOS, like a black screen with white words and you type everything manually. It looks like Pong. So typically what happens is I would get a contract for specific mechanical equipment and I would review to make sure it's possible in a physical sense and that the finances also make sense. Occasionally, we'll encounter a situation where we need to update our system to allow a contract to go through. This would be if we sold an older equipment that we no longer build but had a few spares lying around. Or if a client bought our equipment from a third-party provider but wants us to service it since we're the official company that makes this stuff. It's kind of like a car dealership selling a used car that they don't make anymore. It's still part of their brand, but they might not necessarily have software to support it since it's so outdated. I'm trying to explain the best I can. When we have these types of contracts with older equipment, all we have to do is send a note to a person in a specific department and ask her to open the system temporarily to allow these devices to be added and serviced. The way we send this request is that we fill out a form and submit it to this lady. This lady is something. Anyway, she's a combination of a power-hungry overlord and a scared, pathetic mouse. It's very interesting to see. I sometimes play a game to bet on which mode she will respond with. She's very much a bully who cries when she gets called out for being a bully and then says she's being bullied. Yeah, she's fun. So anyways, one day I received 85 new contracts, same client, all for used equipment that we don't make anymore and have not for years. Someone found a whole bunch of them for dirt cheap and bought them and now want us to service them. Cool, good find, Mr. Client, we'll be happy to help. Typically, you submit one request form per device. Filling out the form is a bit of a pain because it's a very manual process and a bit time-consuming. I like to be efficient and make life easier, so I did some reviewing and noticed that there are really only like 5 models of machines. 85 different serial numbers, but only 5 types. So I sent off a quick email saying the following. Hi lady, not her name, but I'm calling her that here. Hey, I have a whole bunch of machines to add to the system, but I don't want to submit 85 different tickets to you. I checked and saw there's only 5 model types. Can I send you the request in batches by model? Might make our lives a bit easier than going one by one. Now, this lady is notorious for sticking to the rules. I don't usually mind because rules exist for a reason. However, they were also created by people and therefore can be changed by people. In this instance, I was hoping lady would understand that I'm trying to save us both some time. Nope. Her response was, It is unacceptable that you think you have the right to change the way we do things, especially that you don't even work in my department and have no concept of what it is that I do. We do not work however we want. We have procedures to follow, and if you are unfamiliar with these procedures, then it is clear to me that you need training. A new level of which has been achieved. You want me to follow procedures? You don't want to understand that I'm trying to help us both? Let's go then. I spent the next 3 hours creating my emails and ticket requests, but I didn't submit them as I went. Oh no, I waited until I had 85 of them ready to go. Once they were loaded, I spent a hilarious moment clicking send. It was like I was launching little torpedoes every time I clicked send, each causing small devastation as they build up in her inbox and overshadow anything else that might have been in her queue. Also, I know she keeps the volume on, so I know she was hearing that dang ding that has traumatized Outlook users everywhere. One by one, 85 different requests were running to her inbox like moths to a flame. I waited for the inevitable tantrum. Hey, I see you're sending me a bunch of requests. Can you just bunch them together? This is a lot and it's messing up my system now due to the constant influx of emails and tickets. Did I forget to mention that our laptops are also super old? That many emails in one shot most definitely froze her Outlook for some time. I replied, "Oh, sorry that you're having a hard time. I was just following procedure as per your request. I already sent them all, so nothing I can do." "Well, how many requests did you send?" 85. "What?" I then put my status to out to lunch. Have fun, lady. I'm getting a sandwich. Psycho Karen neighbor destroys property and files a false police report with an update. Click the video on your screen to find out what happens to Karen, and I'll see you there.